Hi, I'm Karen, and I live in Calgary, which is Canada's third largest city. Recently, I visited Canada's largest city, number one, Toronto. And if you're like me, the number one thing you have to do in Canada's number one city by population is go book shopping. So that's what we're gonna cover today. I chose to visit 6 independent new stock, or mostly new stock, a few of them had secondhand sections too, bookstores in the downtown, because that's where I was staying. Indie bookstores are actually having a bit of a moment in North America, which, we're 100% here to support. April 2025 saw the largest turnout and sales for Independent Bookstore Day in Canada and the United States. Canada only has one chain bookstore, Indigo, which I've actually been successfully boycotting for the last couple of years due to IDF reasons. There's a link below if you want to learn how you too can boycott Chapters, Indigo, Kohl's, whatever they're calling any new chain bookstore these days. They're all owned by the same company, and it's bad. We're certainly going to continue the boycott. And I did in Toronto, where there were numerous Indigo stores, including the flagship store, which I did not set foot in. I get it. If you're a Canadian outside of any of the major centers and there's one bookstore in town and it's Indigo, Kohl's, Chapters, yeah, there's not many options. I could say Amazon, but that's hardly a better company. And you might not be able to afford new stock, full price titles all the time. I certainly can't. I don't buy new books very often, so this Toronto trip was a bit of a treat, but hopefully you can join me in appreciating that if and when you can support indie businesses and local shops and all that goodness, you can do that, and you can join me, and you can also stick around for my coverage of Little Free Libraries and the Toronto Public Library, because of course we love libraries around here too. All that said, let's hit the streets and see what we find. Stick around after the libraries portion for a haul. There's also chapters below, so you can skip to what you want to hear about. The first shop we're visiting is Little Ghosts. This is a bookstore specializing in horror literature, which is pretty apparent from the ghosts and other cute and fun and spooky decorations all over the store. The theme is carried through in their stickers, t-shirts, and other original swag. They also have coffee and a patio space out back, so you could spend quite a long time here, especially if you're into horror and spooky stuff. Little Ghosts is between Trinity Bellwoods and Little Italy. From there, we walked over to Rontisville, or Roncy, as the locals say, to check out Another Story bookshop. Another Story has a more general selection than Little Ghosts. It isn't specializing in one specific genre, but rather all genres and most of the new books you would want to find. They do have an editorial eye, or leaning towards activist books, as well as Canadian books. You can see a wall of Canadian reads there, as well as gift cards, local zines, indie publications, you name it. There's a large children's section towards the back, and also I note on the website and around the store numerous events throughout the month. It's great that indie bookstores are also fostering their own cultures. Not just you go in and out and buy your books and that's it. It's a conversation, it's a dialogue, and we love to see it all over. Here's a rad shelf. Sex work, media, politics of labor, and Indigenous. After that, I doubled back to Type Books on Queen Street West. This was actually about an hour-long walk. I don't want to give a false impression that all these places are close together. I just really like to walk long distances when I visit other cities. Type Books has kind of a similar feel to Another Story in that you can get most new books that are available in most genres, but they do have a specialization and an eye towards art and design. Another thing you'll start seeing if you poke around indie shops, and this can be any sort of indie shop, not just books, but I've seen it in stationery, even candy, is subscription services. So Type actually has a type and translation subscription service to introduce readers to books in translation. And I think that's a great way to get customer engagement. Also, a large toy section here, toys and books. Basically, tons of stuff for kids or anyone who likes those things. Mask up to visit the Beguiling. Masks are still on, I guess, in Beguiling, but at least they're providing them, so sure. The Beguiling is actually part of Karen's personal lore in that it's a place I've wanted to visit for many years, or possibly even decades, since I was a teenager. It's an extremely large comic store, especially for indie, alternate, avant-garde comics. They also have tons of manga. They have single-issue weekly comics, so your DC, Marvel. There's a separate kids bookstore called Little Island Comics, perfect for all ages. There's a lot of events here as well, author talks and signings, really supporting the comics community, especially across Canada. Of course, there's a bargain basement that I have to check out, and you'll see that I found a small comic here that I'll share in the haul. The Beguiling was on College Street, just north of Kensington Market, and I walked west to Bathurst Street, home to a different Booklist, which is a Black-owned, African-Canadian-focused bookstore and community center. There's lots of fiction and some kids' books, but mostly nonfiction about the African and Caribbean diaspora and global south, and lots of radical thinkers and verso books, so love to see that. The sixth and last bookstore that I was planning to visit was Glad Books, which was actually switching locations during my visit. But if you are in town and able to support this space, queer and trans rights are under threat in North America, and these communities need you more than ever. Please support community initiatives and support Glad Day. Of course, I had my eyes peeled for little free libraries. Toronto didn't disappoint, so keep an eye out as well. The Toronto Public Library has 100 branches. I visited 3 of them. Seen here is the Lillian H. Smith branch. I chose to share this with you because this branch hosts the Merrill Collection of Science Fiction, Speculation, and Fantasy on its 3rd floor. There's usually a museum exhibit and folks researching the history of science fiction and fantasy. So a must visit for Canadian science fiction lovers. This is the haul. I'm going to go through why I chose each of these titles one by one. None of them, other than the comic book, are titles that I'd heard of, but I have reasons, of course, for choosing them. Pretty vibes-based, but also appropriate to the bookstore that I bought them in. First, from Little Ghosts, we have The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White, and it's got purple sprayed edges. I don't think I need to say much more than that. It is YA, but I've been reading more YA lately because honestly, sometimes they're just well-written books. Most of them are well-written books. I think that there's a stereotype of like, you have your, schlocky series titles and that's all YA is, but it's really just a sales category and there's pretty much anything that you could imagine in that category. From another story, we have A Natural History of Transition from Callum Angus. This is a series of short stories that seems to pair up natural world transitions with human growth transitions, like emotional transitions and social transitions. It is part of a promotion they had where you got a free tote bag. So it was somewhat motivated by my needing to carry around all these books in a attractive tote, but the tote bag promotes Canadian authors and organizations for literacy. So that's totally a perfect choice actually for what the project that I had. Third, from Type Books, we have Stroll, the Psychogeographic Walking Tours of Toronto by Sean McAuliffe, updated edition. So this is very recent. I think it was published in 2024. Of why I chose this one, and I think honestly this is my favorite pick that I got in terms of being inspiration for these videos, actually future videos and a series I'm planning to launch in August. But just look, it's got this fold-out map, which is awesome, and it's got, you know, a great illustration style used throughout. It's kind of a doodly but accurate illustration style for maps. And I have a couple of books about walking tours of Calgary, but this one just seems to be a great visual presentation as well. Not that those aren't, but they're a little bit different, just more old school in terms of not being a unified visual presentation of a book. They're just straight ahead information of what they promise, which is walking tours of Calgary, but walking tours of Toronto with a great illustration style. The fourth is Justice Society. Now this is just a little comic anthology I found. It's kind of digest size, so that's kind of your Archie's is digest. They, I guess in the 80s, 70s, 80s, they reprinted some of the 30s and 40s comics as these little digests, which is super cute. I found this in the Beguiling basement. So it was the basement of Beguiling. So, and of course I'd just seen, before I left for my trip to Toronto, had seen the new Superman movie. So there's some of the Justice Society / League characters, and actually it's a plot point in the movie, no spoilers, but they have an ongoing bit where they're still deciding the name of what will probably become the Justice League, but the Justice Gang, the Justice, some sort of group of superheroes. Lastly, we have The Ward. This is from a different book list, and this is The Life and Loss of Toronto's First Immigrant Neighborhood. Now, this seems perfectly appropriate as something to buy from the Black-owned and community-focused bookstore, a different book list. It does cover a community that was lived in by many different diverse groups of people in Toronto. And as I was walking around Toronto, especially all the neighborhoods that are named after the communities that settled there mostly in the early 20th century, Little Italy, Little Portugal, etc., how much of that remains and how much of that is accurate anymore, I'm not really sure. I noticed there's a broad trend of pushing more working class and lower income people out of the center of the city, which is true in pretty much every North American city. So this is a good primer on probably a lost bit of history that wasn't familiar to me, but again, I look forward to reading, and it fits in with a lot of the history books. And also, look, it's got blueprints and maps as well. So geography and especially urban exploration is a kind of recurring theme in the things that I picked up. Thanks once again for joining me as I visited another city and found some books to take home with me relevant to my current interests and vibes. All right, take care all.